was a rift in Chicago between two different portions of one gang. But there was a 3-year period. There were about 250 gangland killings, and you can presume that almost all of those were through gun violence.
Voters were upset by the fact that there were in the city of Chicago alone during the 1920s 400 plus gangland slayings, none of them solved, culminating in the famous St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, in which probably it was never solved. Associates of Al Capone gunned down with a Tommy gun 7 members or sympathizers of the North End gang.
And once again, politicians sought to control the new wave of guns with new regulations, but this time on a national scale.
Some time ago, and I'll be glad to fire it off for you.
And that culminated in the first national legislation, the Gun Control Act of 1934, banning what they called gangster weapons.
This national legislation would mark the first governmental response to urban violence across the country. It was quickly followed by the establishment of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
A special agent must be a good marksman and have the courage to shoot it out with the most venomous of public enemies.
Supported by the new gun control laws, legions of heavily armed G-men took on the gangster subculture.
One of the most enduring legacies of Prohibition was the creation of the National Crime Syndicate, which happened only because of Prohibition and the need for people to have, for mobsters to have allies in other cities and to divide up territories. Obviously, the gun remains a critical element in the continuing operation of criminal enterprise.
But in 1941, combating a bigger enemy became the national priority.
There was something about the way they mentioned the Stand Your Ground law. And this is, I think, about Newtown. Isn't that what it just said? After Newtown. So, it just feels like there's producers that actually do go out and kill a couple for the greater good of millions. Almost like what do you call it? Just a controlling tool. Wish I had a better term for that.
And the civilian market borrows the military advancements.
And just as in prior wars, when World War II was over, many of those guns found their way into civilian hands. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, Americans acquired millions of firearms. At the same time, guns were also finding their way on screens large and small, in television and movies. It was the age of the Western.
They're not talking about what happened to those children. And that makes me think they had something to do with what happened to those children. Or somebody did. And these people mean well. But it's just fucking rude. Is it 3 months today? Is today the 14th? No, today is the 11th. So soon after.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
They're like jumping around all over the place. And what is the fucking point? Not to talk about, not to be able to connect the dots?
The JFK assassination ushered in the most turbulent era in recent American history. As issues of race and class tore at the fabric of society,
another fabricated issue. The race issue.
Against an occupying army, as we saw it, of police. So we decided that we weren't going to play the native people who tried to fight fairly with combat. We decided that the only way we could defend ourselves with the same weapons that were being used against us.
In early 1967, the Black Panthers organized armed patrols through the poorest neighborhoods of Oakland, California, an act that some call the beginning of the modern gun rights movement. At the time, California law permitted citizens to carry loaded weapons so long as they were visible, When the state legislature took up a bill to prohibit individuals from carrying loaded weapons, the Panthers, heavily armed, entered the state capitol to demonstrate for their right to bear arms.
We went to the legislature to protest the gun law that was being debated at the time, and we felt
This has nothing to do with 26 squashed like roadkill children, mutilated, slain. It's like Fahrenheit 451 brainwashing, captivating old video. Who can resist Super 8 film from the 60s and 70s?
Were disarmed when then-Governor Ron state gun control law. The U.S. Congress followed suit by passing the 19...
Honestly, this is called After Newtown. It has nothing to fucking do with Newtown. It's Wag the Dog without the comedy.